Okay, welcome back to yet another lesson, and we want to create a new project whereby we will learn something new. So we'll call it C++. I hope this works. This is lesson 10, and we want to work with data structures. Okay, so that's our topic, and some of the things that we want to work with will then be explained as we proceed. So in essence, our data structures pretty much work in this way. We need to have a definition that's actually outside of our main. It can be within our main, but we need to have certain principles that guide it. I think as we proceed, I'll just be showing you some of the things that we might need to do. I don't have any notes, so it may be easier to be working with the code as we go along, and I'll be explaining. I'll try not to move too fast, but I'll explain as we go. So the first data structure that we actually want to work with is called a struct. So struct simply stands for a structure where we would need to put a name for our given structure. So let's say I'm working with a program that will be working with students, or working with individuals, or working with a certain number of values that I would want. Instead of actually having multiple objects, I can just create one object that I'll name, and then I'll use within the specified program. So for example, let's say I'm working with a bunch of unregistered individuals. So it can be individuals from any particular scenario or any particular institution, where I can say register clients, maybe for lack of a better word. Okay, so what we are then saying is these individuals, I chose to call them clients. They can be anything really, but I decided to call them clients. And then these clients would then need to have certain elements that are true about them, where, for example, we might need to have a character, and then we have a name, which is typical of any client. We then put this as an array of size 20. We can also have a character, a surname. We can also have this as 20 as well. Outside of that, we might need to have a number. Okay, so we can have an int, and then we call the registration number, which I'll then save it as regnum. Okay, and we can also have another integer for maybe an age, right? These are typical elements that we might need for a particular client. But some of you might then ask, we've seen this with variables before, whereby we can create our variables without actually using a structure. So what's the purpose of actually having a structure? Okay, so here's where our structure comes into play. When we're working with a structure, we need to then be able to use our structure in as many elements as possible. So for example, if I have more than one function, I can still be able to reference my structure and then use whatever's within my structure to get certain elements done or to call certain elements into existence. So instead of me repeating my code, I can create an object that is just one object, and within that object I can be able to then pull certain features from that object. And at the same time, I can also be able to then have specific elements that I'll be looking for. So it sort of makes life easier as we are working with more and more code. But for the purposes of the examples, we won't be having that much code. So how do we use, or how do we call a structure within our main? So let's just put a comment there so that we know what this does. We're saying the register client. What does this do? This defines and gives our object values. Okay? So outside of that, we then now need to actually call our structure. So we come to our main and then we go struct register clients. As you can see, it now shows up, and then we need an identifier for the structure. So we can then say register clients can be RC, like that. So what this then means, we can actually now be able to call our structure. Okay, structure call, like that. Okay, so what this then means now is we can actually have our values from our structure within our main. So let's say I put an output where I want to show an individual how this works. We'll then say, please, or rather, enter a first name, like that. And then outside of our first name, we put our end line. Okay, then we put a C in, so that we get that first name. And then we say, since we've got our structure in place, we put RC dot, and then we get our name. That's how we actually call the values. So RC becomes our identifier. And the moment we put a period pretty much means we are then referencing a value from a structure. So this is referencing values in the structure. Okay. So what this then means is we've got all our references and we can actually now work with our structure. Okay, so as it stands, maybe we can just run it to see how this works. Okay, so we need to enter the first name. Let's say I enter my first name as follows. We're good to go. So in essence, we have actually worked with our structure to get a value. So this then becomes helpful in that the more code that we've got, we can always be able to reference our structure until we get to the end of the program. So let's just maybe fill up the rest of the code, and we'll explain certain things as we also go along. So I also can put a cout, and then in my cout, I can then say enter a surname. Okay, and then our surname, we need to also do the same thing with our cin, and our cin gets our rc dot surname. We do the same for the next two, where we have a cout, we have an end line, and then we say enter a registration number. We also have a cin rc.reg number, cout. We then say enter an age, and then we put our inline. So with our inline, we then need to put a cin as well, and then our cin gets our age. Okay, that then becomes the last bit of our coding. Okay, so to end off this particular program, we will not do for the rest of them, because we still want to see how these data structures work and how we can play around with the data structures to get certain elements done. Okay, so outside of this now, we want to then see how we view these. Okay, so we can put a cout, and then we want to view content like that. So to view is simply exactly the same. We simply put a cout as well, and then we put the name. We then put our variable, which is rc.name, and then we put an end line like that. So when we then run it, we are then prompted to do these elements sequentially. So I'll put the first name, I'll put the second name, I'll put the registration number, I'll put the age, and as you can see, since I called only for the first input that we've got, I'll then be able to see my program displaying the name only. So that is pretty much how our structures work, or how we can work with our structures. So this is an example of one of the data structures that we've got, and there's a lot more that we can actually add to this. But to begin with, I just want to give you a brief introduction on how each element works, and maybe we can add some more to each of the individual structures, because there are very many of them that are available. But that is how our structures pretty much work. Okay, so there's another element that's exactly the same as our structure, but it differs in just the title. So we can do another mini project to show you how that works. And since it's a repetition of this, we will not actually have too much to work with. Okay, so we then call this one union data structure, like that. So I click on next, I click on finish, and then we're good to go. Okay, so we do exactly the same concept. Okay, so continuing, we want to then get into the next type of data structure, and the next data structure that we want to work with is called a union, where it's similar to our structure, but we use the keyword union. Then we want to have our union name, which will be numbers, and then our numbers will then get the following elements. So we want int num, and then we want float let's call it FL for lack of a better word. What this then means now is we've created our two numbers, and would want to now call our union members the same way we did for our structure. But in this particular case now, we will call our union members in the following way. We put numbers, and then we put n, like that. So what this then means now is we've actually called our numbers, which is our union, and we can now initialize any elements within our union. So we can say our n.num is equal to 10, and we can say our n.fl is equal to 3.457. Okay, and then to see what these do, we can just simply put a cout, and with our cout we can then put n.num plus n. No, I think let's not put the plus, it will give us a different output. n.fl, and then we end our line like that. So it should be able to display what these two give us, and that's what it's giving us. But I think because of the way I put the code, let me just remove this line there, and I'll create its own line over here, so that at least when you see what the end result is, it is clear. Okay, I'm sure like that it should come out a whole lot better. Okay, there we go. So the first element, it gave us 10, 7, 9, what have you. And then the next element gave us 3, 4, 5, 7. Which, to a certain extent, I think we've got some sort of a logic error, but at least it's giving us what we are hoping for. This is what we wanted to see, where it gives us num, it also gives us the float value, and then we can be able to see how we actually use it within our system, or within how we want to work with our content. So that is pretty much a general run through of how our union works. So it's still part of our data structures, and we are calling them data structures because we can be able to name it under one name and then have more than one element showing up in that particular data structure itself. So with the first one, which was our structure, and the second one, which was our union, that is pretty much how we work with our elements. So continuing from there, we want to now get into the next type of data structure that we've got, and this is called a class. So a class becomes something that we need a little bit more time on, because it will have some more code. If I can then state it as code, it will have some more areas of actually working with, whereby we are then saying outside of our union and our structure, our class, we simply put it as class, and then we need to give it a name. Okay, so we can actually call it automobiles, like that. And then you can actually then tell with the previous ones that we use exactly the same concept. However, with a class now, we can now be able to add slightly more functionality to it. For example, we can then make a statement like public, okay, which then means with our public, we want everything that we are putting in public to be accessible anywhere else within our class, but with certain restrictions. So we can be able to work with restrictions the moment that we know we've got our class. So let's say, for example, we want to work with our automobiles, and we want, first of all, the first variable is our model. The next variable is our color. The next variable can be our make, okay, whereby we're simply saying these are the three elements that we can work with in terms of our vehicle, and as long as we know that they are there, we can now be able to manipulate our class, okay. But as we are working with our class, all we simply do is we say automobiles, like that, and then we put the first value, or the value that we want to have. So we can say car 1, like that. Okay, so in other words, we have actually called our class, and our class is now referenced as car1, whereby we can say car1 dot color is equal to red. We can also say car1 dot make is equal to Ford, and then car1 dot model there. We can then put the name of the Ford that we've got, and we can call it a Ranger, like that. So in other words, we have actually called our class, and then this then means we've got our class up and running, okay. And then maybe let's just see with the aid of examples how these come out, okay. So we can say car1 dot model like that. It simply then means when we run our program, we will be able to see the model of the car, okay. However, this then becomes a plus in that the moment we've got our classes, I can simply work as follows. Let me just copy this and paste it below as it is. I can actually now come there and have a second column. So I have a car number 2. So I'll change everything to 2, and then I'll change the color there to blue. I'll change the model there to Toyota. I'll change, the make, and then the model, I'll put it as a Starlet, like that. Okay, so what this then means is I can now be able to work with both cars, okay, where the first car is a Ford Ranger, the second car is a Starlet, and I'm still working with all these within my data structure. So my data structure allows me to actually manipulate my program based on what I'm hoping to achieve, based on what I'm hoping to say that this is how my program should work. This is how my content should also work. So in essence, that's pretty much an intro to how our data structures work. Hopefully in the next lesson we can be able to take up from where we left off, and please do follow these videos step by step. Any questions, please do post in the comment section, and we can assist each other if you've got any challenges that you might face.